Welcome to the programme. The international community is preparing to step up the pressure on Syria's president with a new vote at the United Nations General Assembly. In the next couple of hours, they're expected to approve a non-binding Arab-sponsored resolution condemning human rights abuses by the Syrian government. But Russia has already warned that it's opposed to any UN resolution that's not balanced. And inside Syria, the government continues to attack the opposition strongholds of Homs and Dera. Al Jazeera's Sena Hodder takes up the story.
The Syrian military's objective is to deny its opponents strongholds. Homs is one of those areas. And there seems to be a renewed push in Dera, where the uprising began almost a year ago. Activists say they inflicted casualties among security forces, but they say they need outside help to win the fight. A resolution passed by the Arab League urged countries to provide all kinds of political and material support to the opposition, but not yet weapons.
The way Syria is positioned next to Iraq, Turkey, you have Israel, and you have Lebanon. So bringing any arms should be in coordination with the international community. So this is why that could take maybe a week, but we already start talks with the different countries who they are willing to support in that area.
The armed opposition continues to grow. More defections from the army were announced in Hama, pledging their allegiance to the Free Syrian Army. So who is the FSA? Colonel Riyad al-Assad became the leader after leaving the Syrian army. He had 4 deputies. But earlier this month, 2 of them said they were forming a higher military council led by Mustafa Ahmed al-Sheikh. Some reports suggest the council will supersede the FSA. Others suggest it is for defectors of higher ranks than Riyad al-Assad. But the FSA is not just made up of military men. Even the opposition acknowledges that civilians have taken up arms, and its Turkey-based leadership may not always be giving the orders on the ground.
The only message that came from their would-be allies was, for goodness sake, speak with one voice. And they don't, because every time you see a new group, whether it be very militant, whether it be more Islamist, and you've got to remember the militants in Homs are becoming very Islamist. There are beheadings taking place of government supporters around Homs, as there were before the siege of Hama in 1982. Very serious things are happening.
The opposition doesn't shy away from claiming responsibility for attacks. In this video, they say they destroyed a military checkpoint in Hama. Right now, their goal is to hold on to territory. With more and heavier weapons, they say they could advance. But more weapons could also mean a much deadlier conflict. Sena Hodder, Al Jazeera.
Well, the resolution that's being considered at the United Nations General Assembly is symbolic, since even if it does pass, it wouldn't actually be legally binding. Now, it was drafted by Saudi Arabia and is co-sponsored by at least 60 countries, including Bahrain, Somalia and Libya. It supports the Arab League's plans for ending the violence in Syria and calls for a UN special envoy to the country. But it does not refer to an earlier plan to send peacekeepers into the country or for President Assad to step down. Well, France says a compromise with Russia at the UN Security Council is possible, and in the short term it wants to work on a new resolution to set up humanitarian corridors.
Nous sommes donc prêts à travailler à New York.
We are ready to work in New York on a resolution project which is inspired by the Arab League proposals, stopping of violence and humanitarian assistance. I believe the idea I put forth about humanitarian corridors wasn't that inadequate after all. I rediscussed it with the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who is also absolutely ready to work in that direction.
Let's go live now to New York, where we can talk to Peter Wittig, the German ambassador to the UN. Ambassador, thanks very much for being with us on the programme. Now, this vote, as we've said, is largely symbolic. Why then does it matter so much if it's not actually legally binding?
Well, it matters a lot because this afternoon the membership of this body of the United Nations can send out a very strong message saying we stand by the Syrian people, we want the violence to stop immediately, and we want to support the efforts of the Arab League, the political efforts to end the crisis in Syria. So that will go out to the world as a strong message to the Syrian people and the Arab League, and this is why Germany is such a strong partner in this and supports the Arab League wholeheartedly.
How will this draft, Ambassador, differ from the one which went before? We already know that it doesn't refer to this plan to send in peacekeepers or for President Assad to step down.
Well, this is a resolution drafted by the Arab League, and it has our support. It basically condemns the Syrian authorities for this unabated repression, and it calls for support for the Arab League plan of end of January and the recent suggestions in a general form of the 15th of the 12th of February, just a week ago. So that is a strong message. We want to support the Arab League in all its efforts. And it has, therefore, importance what the General Assembly this afternoon says, and I hope it will be a very, very strong message, although it's not binding.
And what else do you think the European countries can bring to the table? There was some talk today of yet more sanctions, for example, possibly even communications equipment being provided for those against the Assad government.
Well, you know, and you refer to it, the European Union has been very much in the avant-garde of imposing sanctions on the Syrian regime. Various rounds of sanctions were decided upon, and they are biting, and I think they had an effect, as we can see with the Syrian regime, and that was a very, very strong tool that we used as a European Union. But of course, here it's a different ball game, if I may say so. In the Security Council, we had a double veto, although 13 countries of the Security Council were strongly in favor of the resolution of the Arab League, but we still have to grapple with that double veto, and probably a no vote this afternoon by two influential members of the Security Council.
Ambassador Wittig, I know that Germany remains convinced that some Security Council action will be required, and I know that you used the words strong message will be delivered. But, you know, for many people around the world who are watching this conflict unfold, I think a lot of people would think the time for strong messages has already come and gone.
Well, I entirely agree. Ideally, we would want to go beyond messages and just put beef to our declarations. But we tried our best. We support the Arab League in all its efforts. As a European Union, we have used a rather strong tool, but we want the Arabs to be in the lead. Let's not forget, we want the Arabs to take care of that conflict with a strong backing of the Security Council. But since that was not possible, we have to go now to the General Assembly. But we hope that eventually the Council might be ready to act, especially if the humanitarian crisis gets worse and worse. I think there will have to be done something, and I'm looking here also to the meeting in Tunis of the group of friends of the Syrian people that is taking place in a week or so, and I think here Germany and others will be a strong partner once again with the Arab League.
Peter Wittig, a German ambassador to the UN, thanks very much for joining us there live from the United Nations.